Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next session at Power to the Pixel, which we can talk about new distributors, distributors even. I imagine distributors are the same as distributors. They are for the purposes of this session anyway. I'm Michael Gubbins, I'm the editor of Screen International, and just very briefly as an introduction, I've started going to these events really over the last few years. I've got very into this kind of field, and one of the problems I have is that when you go back to the kind of people that we're mixing with on a normal basis, which quite often, as those of you involved in the British film industry know, they can be a miserable bunch in their own way, and trying to talk to them about this kind of field I think the scary stuff that to which Pete was alluding a second ago tends to come pretty high up the agenda pretty damn quickly, actually. And one understands the threats, and one understands the fears that are there, and I think they overcome, I think at the moment anyway, there's a lack of understanding about this world, which when you're at these events you kind of miss, because I find both the compelling logic of what we're going to be talking about and what these panelists are going to be talking about, I think that's the logic seems very clear. I think also it's very easy to get wrapped up in the enthusiasm and the brilliance of some of the people who are already in this field. I find myself feeling a bit like I'm at a revivalist function every now and again. I just want to shout "Hallelujah, brother" every time anyone says anything. But the reality is still that it's quite far away. There's a very, very big disconnect. But I do think things have changed. And I think what's changed is not an understanding of the way that this new media world might pan out. I don't think it's about the changes or the reality or the potential of those changes that are obsessing people. I think what we've seen and what I'm seeing at conferences around the world at the moment is that there is one piece of consensus, there is one understanding, and that is the world as it is broke. The distribution mechanism that we're seeing right now, as far as independent film is concerned, makes no sense whatsoever. And I think what we're now seeing is a period of waking up to the idea there's nothing to go back to, and only really beginning to engage with what possibly may come. And I think that makes these very disturbing and very exciting times. And first up will be David Straus and Joe Neulight, who are founders of Withoutabox. Again, a company that was founded 7 years ago that in terms of self-distribution and film festivals and so on has become a real name in the industry, a really well-known name. And they're each going to give an introduction to their businesses and to their ideas, and then we're going to be taking questions. So, David, Joe.
First, Liz, thank you very much for inviting us, and thank you and Tishna and your team for putting this together. Right after the conference, actually in a couple days, we're heading over to Geneva to participate in WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. And there's a conference there on intellectual property in the creative industries. We thought instead of doing a traditional nuts and bolts demonstration of what we do at Withoutabox, and we'd love for you to look at the website, of course, instead we're going to give you an abridged version of what we're presenting at WIPO. So we will make our 15-minute allotted time, but we're going to tag team it, so please indulge us.
The French Jesuit thinker Pierre Teilhard de Chardin came up with a useful metaphor for the evolution of our planet. Imagine the Earth growing as a series of concentric spheres. It began with the formation of a geosphere, inanimate matter, which evolved out of itself a biosphere of life that encircled the globe. Out of life, humankind reached up uniquely to develop a sphere of shared thought and cognition, which Teilhard called the noosphere, spelled N-O-O-S, for the Greek meaning mind. And finally, in his goal-oriented view of evolution, Teilhard wrote that human consciousness would condense to a single point, which he called Omega, where we all become one essential being. He saw this achievement as Christ, but the concept has many names and is a yearning within each of us. We know that evolution works over great expanses of time, and then suddenly all at once. We're privileged and frightened to live in one of those accelerated times. Things are happening suddenly all at once. Even as unprecedented human upheaval rushes in on us, a Cambrian-like explosion of new forms offers new hope and possibility. Before our eyes, a generation has just passed the relay baton from the analog age to the digital age, and another generation is sprinting out of breath with it. With cosmic irony, our IP, intellectual property, is liberated as never before and threatened as never before by the newer IP on the block, Internet Protocol. Here in 2007, Teilhard's evolutionary striving is viscerally familiar to those of us inspired by and mired in this transformational collision of the twin business phenomena of IP and IP.
Withoutabox. Our company was sprung appropriately in the year of the millennium from a modest but inventive idea. What if we could bring together in one place all the independent filmmakers of the world, except instead of offering them quote-unquote exposure, offer them something they really need, useful information systems on which they could operate cottage businesses, like bungalows on a studio lot, while pursuing their own creative destinies. In other words, we were frustrated filmmakers trying to break into the market, and we thought transforming the entire distribution paradigm would actually be an easier thing to do and an easier way to do what we wanted to do, which back then was to make films and find an audience all around the world for them. Suddenly, we were business people. Independents learned to be.
Of course, we haven't made a film since. We set out unassumingly, but with highest purpose, by building a whiz-bang aggregation machine for filmmakers and their films in the form of a one-stop shop international film festival submission system. You can fill out one entry form once, then just pick, click, and apply to more than 700 now partner film festivals, mostly in North America and increasingly around the world.
We actually work now with over 150,000 filmmakers in 200 countries around the world, growing by thousands each month. More than ever, we see and believe that independent owners of creative property can be given tools to access the worldwide market and to directly exploit their own rights, according to their talents and their willfulness to do so. Any film backed by the marketing efforts of just its creators and piped through the exquisite and benevolent system ought to generate some measurable return over a period of time. This is the long tail concept that Peter mentioned earlier. If not always profit, but at very least a more fair and honest answer back from the marketplace of ideas and entertainment.
As we've been discussing here already, in our lives to date, the media landscape has been dictated to us by powerful flows of capital, sweeping licenses on intellectual property, and imperious top-down marketing. Teilhard died in 1955, but his prophetic vision has taken shape in what some have since dubbed the infosphere, wrapping the earth in a fit and frenzy, profoundly connecting us all. Within the infosphere, Withoutabox sees the emergence of a vital and highly participatory media sphere, a subregion of sorts. It is here that we generate our vision and lay our larger plans. Each sphere of evolution can be seen as an invitation for all of us to participate in creation at a higher level. And so our mission, stated in today's metaphor, is to become a commercial platform and a playground for a more open and creative media sphere. Our daily mission is simply to connect artists and audiences.
As a media company, we are rights neutral. In our model, the question is not how many of the rights that flow through us can we own? Rather, how many of those rights are finding owners, promoters, or audiences through us? The first 100 years of film were about consolidating exclusive libraries and then licensing pieces in controlled windows, with the firm reliance on constructing a mass market. The next 100 years will be about setting libraries loose, even non-exclusively, among competing entities within the same territories, and then bridging opportunity more on the fly to maximally exploit assets.
Withoutabox has already seen this kind of opportunity multiply with film festivals. There are more film festivals competing for more submissions than ever before, yet they report getting more and better films than ever before. And as a result, more and different films are getting seen by larger and more diverse audiences than ever before. It's not just the same old stuff getting recycled on the same old circuit like it used to be. Buy-in to the system on all sides now supports a shared platform for discovery, where we daily find truth in the old adage, one person's trash is another person's treasure.
A new business model is emerging for exploiting creative properties, and it will be dualistic at least. On one side will remain traditional exploitation through sales, relationships, guaranteed output deals, and formal contracts. On the other side will be system-managed exploitation, where a user uploads content in one side, opts into a menu of monetization services, and then waits for cash to fall out the other side. This may seem like a ridiculous simplification, but we must think of it as a direction for now. Not an end, just a direction. And one that can accommodate established professionals, aspiring careerists, and hobbyists alike.
In the new system, rights will become segmented rather than omnibus. Licensing and delivery will become just in time rather than laborious. Exclusivity will become less fetishized, and values will be driven less on acquisition myths and more on real-time market feedback. Pricing itself may be leveled to runtime equations or foregone altogether, as many throw their hands up to piracy and move to corporate sponsorship, consumer patronage, or other DRM-free models.
Lawrence Lessig writes, "The digital world is closer to ideas than things," and he challenges whether we should treat these ideas as we treat things. He suggests we not burden them with the same controls as traditional property, and that perfect control is not necessary in the world of ideas, nor is it wise. We concur. We see the world without a box. This does not mean we should not value creators and value them highly. It does mean we may come to realize that a sizable portion of our creative output lends itself to social utility, to open source, to collectivity, more than to definitions of property capitalized for the prosperity of an individual or a corporate ego.
We live in an age with more than enough talent and subject matter to amaze us all from the day we're born to the day we die. Maybe we always have, except now it's surfacing exponentially. The ease of digital expression has caused the public to rise out of alienation and share themselves in astonishingly simple and sometimes prodigal ways. The nature of much content now flooding the marketplace is that it's not made by careerists, but is often quite compelling, much funnier or scarier or lovelier or more informative than most of what we see in the sanitized media.
There's also no end to the many worthy independent films being made. Festival winners among them, even films that once found respectable distribution and decent returns, but whose licenses have since lapsed back to the original producers after 5 or 7 years. The creators have gone on with their lives while great content goes dormant, like Sunken Treasure. Studios represent their properties in high-valued back catalogs decades after decades, resurrecting, remastering, and recycling concepts. Likewise, independents need a trustworthy platform on which to park their assets in perpetuity, rather than in a musty garage or on the desktop hard drive that crashed last week.
So much creative property simply does not rest in the hands of an agent best equipped to exploit it. And too often, agents are quick to condemn early non-performers to the death vault of perpetuity. But what if the vault were the agent? A living vault, always ready to make a deal. Traditional media companies covet the first look at content entering the marketplace. Withoutabox also sees a great future for the last look. For every one of us here today, it's highly likely that our favorite film on the planet is one we have not seen. It's already out there, but we have not found it. It has not found us. As principals in Withoutabox, we get handed DVDs from time to time that are some of the best things we see anywhere. That doesn't mean it's always mass marketable. We get that. It does mean that it just needs to be matched with the right audiences over a longer period of time across non-traditional demographics and sometimes sprawling geographies, the long tail that we've been talking about.
So the new media conglomerates will be the Amazons, the Googles, and the Facebooks that cater not to the least common denominator, but to the highest individual connectedness, and who place their emphasis on discovery, sharing, and monetization through authentic affiliation or affiliates, rather than through strict ownership and licensing. In the self-distribution scenario, anyone will be able to aggregate an audience. Even audiences will be able to aggregate their own audience and sell directly to consumers via physical copies and digital transmissions, aided in the most successful cases by viral marketing. A Withoutabox rights holder will be able to syndicate content to outlets in multiple channels and distribution windows through a dashboard of opt-in express licensing agreements where the revenues, whether pennies or small fortunes, can flow back to their own management systems.
So much contemporary dialogue obsesses with protecting what exists today. Our massive and precarious economies and ecosystems of all kinds dependent on them. Disruptions in markets can be expensive and scary, sometimes deadly, especially for the reigning class of supply chain controllers that has the most to lose. Extinctions can come quickly. Let's look at the record business. This is not a time to judge our success by how efficiently or how effectively we can preserve and expand the status quo. Like our geosphere and our biosphere, the infomedia sphere is already challenged by looming questions and urgent issues of sustainability. We might, as humans, take this rare moment in our self-creation to step back and to use our noodle spheres up here and to ask ourselves not just what we can do in a blind heat to fatten our wallets, but what kind of possibility do we want to create for our endangered race, whether it lasts another 50 or 50 million years.
When we read a great book or watch a great movie, we find ourselves filled with an ineffable feeling. We value it so highly. What is that? What is that feeling? Is it that we have expressed ourselves through a work just as meaningful as its creator? Have we met in the world and understood each other perfectly? Whether it's an enlightening documentary, a soaring love story, or an elephant farting in the lens, it doesn't finally matter. Life is affirmed in such moments. While a well-financed and appropriate role will remain for the commercial media, now begins a greater opportunity for individual expression and individual consumption. There will be no shortage of customers on Earth, enough to sustain both economies profitably, even as quantities of great content will be freely given away. When filmmakers and independent promoters can access the pipelines and the channels spreading themselves out in the media sphere, and when consumers can passively and accurately profile themselves in comparison with the tastes of anonymous millions of others, we have the potential for life to affirm itself boundlessly.
More than we know, the future of us may lie in the wise handling of our IPs. These are the batons with which we race into the digital age. Intellectual property, internet protocol, independent production, independent promotion in perpetuity. Advance the media sphere and we advance the world. In reality, there's no lasting protection against it. None of us can prevent the continents from drifting, life from mutating, awareness from spreading, consciousness from informing itself, spirit from connecting. Thinking now, way out of the box, and into the higher spheres, individual expression and promotion on a mass scale may be the greatest mechanism for the creation of spiritual wealth ever devised by us clever humans. It is suddenly possible that each one of us is a latent messiah, capable of bringing concept into form and spreading ourselves out to others. Beyond the colorations and the content of our content, we all have one essential message. I am here with you. A statement of grace that lifts every one of us high into Teilhard's noosphere. Or does it go further? I am you. A statement of sublime unity that draws us all toward his theoretical omega. What would we charge for that? What would we pay to go there? It's either priceless or it's free. We shall all find out together.
As for now and for Withoutabox, we too are here for you, with you, serving the media sphere.
Thank you.
Pleasure, gentlemen.
Try and be as eloquent.
Do you want that? No. Do you want that?
I do in the. Okay, that's us. Thank you. So, hello, everybody. I'll try and be as eloquent, but I don't know if I can. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about where YouTube fits into everything we're talking about today. And just to give you a little background, I'm the film manager there. So I am charged with building and managing the film community, which I do through featuring the best content on YouTube, building programs, to engage users, particularly filmmakers, and working on our product to sort of better support filmmakers and film lovers as we go forward. So I actually used to work in the traditional film world in New York, both at Big Beach, where we made Little Miss Sunshine and Everything is Illuminated, and before that at Miramax. And I chose to move over to digital distribution just because of all the innovation and creativity that I saw happening there, and feeling a little frustrated with how sort of structured and protocol-driven the film world was. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm at YouTube. It's an interesting time for film on YouTube, kind of across the spectrum. On the one side, we have filmmakers like Michael Moore and Leonardo DiCaprio recently engaging users to sort of participate with our content in new and kind of interesting ways. We have studios sometimes leaking clips. We have users collaborating with one another to create films that are determined by the audience as they move along. We have really innovative filmmakers like Four-Eyed Monsters, who you'll hear from later, posting their entire feature films. And we have programs that we're starting to run, like Project Direct, which we recently launched, dedicated to finding sort of the upcoming film talent on the internet. So I'll just talk a little bit about the audience on YouTube and how we've gotten to this place and what it kind of means for the future. But when YouTube first launched, it really was all about community. It was really a way to share video, personal video, much the way that we've used, text messaging and email and telephone, just a way to connect with other people. And as the site has grown, we've gone from, I think, 3 million videos were watched daily in 2005. We're now at hundreds of millions of videos being watched daily, hundreds of thousands of videos being uploaded daily. We're the 8th most trafficked site in the US, et cetera, et cetera. I'll breeze through this. But I think it creates sort of a really changing landscape. So while community is still really key to the site and to our history and our future, there are other factors coming into play, and one of those is a rising demand for high-quality content. So we see this both on the site with users really being willing to watch videos that are a lot longer than the sort of traditional 2-minute clips that have been such a hit. We see them commenting much more on films that are videos rather that demonstrate great technique and innovation. We see this across the market really with the number of competitive sort of video sharing sites that are emerging now that are built on professional content versus UGC. there's also a growing awareness of the power of internet video, I think. We saw this, at least heavily in the United States, with Saturday Night Live and some of the viral videos like Lazy Sunday that came out of that, as well as with campaigns like, I don't know, the Senator George Allen, who was caught using a racial slur on YouTube, and that really ended his campaign. So we've seen sort of the power of YouTube and other video sharing sites to really determine what is going on in popular culture, in politics, and everything. So I think that really signals an enthusiastic and attentive audience, and that means it's an audience that's really eager, hungry for content, checking in daily, very engaged, aware that they're a part of something special, and that audience is as big as 200 million unique users per month on YouTube right now. So I think that this is an audience that's really ripe for filmmakers to take advantage of. So first I'm going to kind of talk about audience and the problems of traditional distribution, which we've touched upon a bit today. But as Ira talked about, the costs of marketing a film are obviously tremendous. And beyond that, I find that with a lot of independent films, distributors are really challenged to also creatively market when we're talking about films that have really tricky subject matter or no star power. And so I think low P&A budgets that don't allow for TV spots or print ads or traditional methods of marketing, combined with material that's often difficult to connect consumers to for some distributors, leads to really small audiences. Theaters are not full, and we're talking about theatrical distribution if you've even been lucky enough to get that. DVDs aren't necessarily selling. So to me, small audiences really signal that, number one, as a filmmaker, you're really not making an impact. People aren't seeing your product. And number two, you're probably not making any money. And that really, I think, begs the question of, is this distribution? If to distribute means to give out, you have an audience to give to. In this case, you have very little audience and very little revenue. So I would argue that probably this is not the most successful method for most independent filmmakers. So the benefits of uploading to YouTube and I think digital distribution are you have direct engagement with your enthusiastic and attentive audience of 200 million users per month. And I think that that requires you to be a really innovative and pioneering filmmaker to move from behind the camera to being able to really communicate to your audience. But in my opinion, it's the creative kind of force behind the film that is usually the one that is best able to communicate the film to others, rather than having sort of distribution companies who are sometimes baffled by how to do that. We have audiences also like what Ira talked about in terms of sort of competition in the market and the fact that films are so pricey. When you have content that is free, you have audiences who are a lot more likely to experiment with films from lesser-known filmmakers without star power, perhaps tricky subject matter like I talked about. Also, content is accessible on YouTube. You don't have to hire a babysitter. You don't have to go find a parking spot. Audiences, again, I think are really willing to take more of a risk on content when it's at their fingertips. So I think what that kind of says about YouTube is you've got a ton of people watching your film potentially. You're able to directly market, and we can talk a little bit more about how to do that later, and I think Four-Eyed Monsters will also talk about that a bit. And so I think you've got sort of the audience portion, the connection with your audience, but what about revenue, which is obviously important to many filmmakers. So I would kind of argue that audience is really key to creating revenue. There are two ways that we see filmmakers using the YouTube platform to do this, and one is through our user partner program, which I won't go into too much detail about here. You can hopefully read more about it in press or online, or maybe you already know. But in this program, we run advertising against partners who are original content creators, and we share that revenue with them. Important changes recently have been that we're rolling it out to more and more users. We're working on how to make that process more scalable. We are developing new forms of advertising, like in-video ads, which you may have seen, to drive up the CPM price so that we can share more revenue with filmmakers. Excuse me. Then there are also the fact that audiences can really drive innovative business models. Last January, David Carr wrote in the New York Times about a YouTube filmmaker named M. Strange, who was at Sundance at the time, that the web has proved that if you produce something the consumer wants, a business model might follow. And I would argue that, that Four-Eyed Monsters really did that. In June, they posted their feature-length film to YouTube. And they had already built up a massive audience through online podcasts detailing the production of their film. And they used the promise of that audience to secure sponsorship for the presentation of their film on YouTube. And again, I'll let them talk more about that later. But so they walked away with a financial reward, media attention, a fan base for future films. So I think if you are willing to work at leveraging audience, there are ways to make money off of your content online. So beyond that, beyond the eyeballs and the revenue, I think there are some additional benefits worth talking about. Number one, filmmakers retain their rights. So YouTube obviously does not take any of your rights away. You can post a film, you can take it down when you release the DVD, you can leave it up when you release the DVD. If something theatrical happens down the road, take it down then, put it back up. It's completely up to you. You are in control of what happens to your product. Filmmakers can also involve audiences in the creation of their work. So going back to MDOT, he's referred to YouTube quite often as his own personal focus group. Rather than an expensive studio deal, he can put up test footage, he can see how audience members react to it, he can hear their feedback, and make sure that he's really making the best film he possibly can. Aspiring filmmakers can be discovered. Yes, you can still submit your films to festivals and sometimes they get in, but I know in my experience going to them, much of the hype these days surrounds the gala presentations, the premieres, the Little Miss Sunshines of the world that have star power, and it's still pretty difficult as an independent filmmaker to get an audience there and to really be seen. Sure, on YouTube it's also difficult. You've got millions and millions of videos. But if you're savvy about marketing and you begin to target your audiences, as your audience grows, people are watching and people do see you. And we've seen a ton of music industry, traditional music industry companies signing musicians off of YouTube right and left. We've seen it happening with TV shows, TV series, web series created on YouTube getting picked up by the networks. And I think that this is extending to film as well. And then lastly, and I think this is really important, and I'll show a little video so you can take a breather from hearing me speak, but filmmakers can really see the impact of their work. And I think this is really important and something that we've kind of completely forgotten with theatrical distribution, but the importance of seeing how your work really affects people. So I'm just going to play a short clip that I edited of after the Four-Eyed Monsters posted their film to YouTube in June. They got a number of video responses to the work. Maybe, is there? Okay. Oh, that's not what we want. Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll play this real quick. Will the sound?
I think you guys need to take a look at this.
First feature film ever in its entirety on YouTube. It's a pretty exciting day for the future of independent film.
Even though I own the DVD, I did watch it on YouTube.
I'm glad to see that you put your film out there.
I think this might be the first time I've actually found something on YouTube that I actually feel has changed my life.
This movie is very much, without a doubt, your life.
My friend emailed me and said, oh, this film reminds me of YouTube.
Honestly, I hate them both, but I really like them both because I feel for them and I know them. I am them.
What do I say?
I can't verbalize it.
I don't know how to express emotions.
The chaos of communication.
Love is just a bonus.
I've been a foreign monster most of my life.
I'm already really uncomfortable with who I am.
I don't think I know how to function when I'm not one.
I'm really scared of the future. If you could, would you? And you did. I'm only 17, but I hope I'll have that kind of courage. This is how you're really affected me.
Okay. So I know that that might be a little touchy-feely for some people, and that's what, some people think of YouTube as being, and but I think there's something really remarkable about being a filmmaker, being an artist, and being able, I did it, yes, thank you, and being able to see the way that your film reaches audiences and to see what that looks like. So I guess in closing, we've seen what's going on within film on YouTube now. It's really, I think, in its infancy. There's a lot still to happen in the future. I think that I would encourage filmmakers and distributors to sort of think about digital rights in a new way, to start engaging online audiences, whether that's through posting production vlogs, outtakes, deleted scenes, Q&As with directors, start engaging your audiences and building them, and then you will be able to leverage those fan bases, I think, for financial and artistic reward. So I think on the YouTube side of things, we need to continue to develop our user partner program to be as inclusive as possible and improve revenue streams accordingly. We need to ensure that content and talent is discoverable. I know that's a complaint, and one that we constantly work on, how to best present content, how to make it easy for you to find what you're looking for. And we need to explore ways to improve the YouTube experience for filmmakers and film lovers, whether that's through quality, presentation, ease of feedback, etc. It's all stuff that we are aware of and working on. So I think that's pretty much it for me, but we can talk more in the panel. Okay, thanks.
So while you're all recovering, I just have to have one of those little confessional moments, and I hope you'll bear with me. I've spent most of the last probably 7 years at events, something like this, where usually it involved my forehead against a brick wall. A lot of the time. And I'm having one of those moments today where I sort of feel the wall crumbling down in front of me. So I apologize a little bit if I feel a little off balance. And I'm really going to try not to be adversarial out of habit. But when you have somebody like Peter Buckingham standing up and making a fantastic speech this morning that really addresses some of the pointy ends of the film industry, I kind of feel like the Pope's just delivered my sermon. So I'm going to kind of do my best and see how we go. And as I say, I'll try not to kind of be too adversarial out of habit, because I kind of feel like we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say is, who else wants to go to WIPO and hear them deliver that speech to those folks? I do. That's awesome. I actually am going to try and be really, really practical for about 10 minutes and talk about the toolkits. Many of us sort of have our toolkits. I'm not a tool maker, but I do make things. And some of those things in the toolkits we completely take for granted, and sometimes we forget to open the toolkit and reevaluate it every now and again and check out whether we've actually got the best possible tools to help us do exactly what it is we want to do and to make the things that we want to make. And so the sort of the filmmaker's toolkit, or the creator's toolkit, is usually a pretty varied one. We hope that there's a very, very big dollop of talent in that toolkit, because that helps a whole hell of a lot. It's not all you need, but we hope that's there. So for purposes of today, we're going to assume that all of us are fabulous storytellers. So we'll take that one as read. But then I think as filmmakers, we also have in our toolkit relationships. Key part of what we do when we're trying to get films made, or we're trying to get anything in the creative industries made, are the relationships we have. Who do we know? Who can help us? Who can connect us with the right people? Who can connect us with talent? Who are the talent that we know? Who can help us along the way? Other sort of tools that we have in there are ones that, some of us are less interested in and others are more interested in. Things like processes, things like systems, things like different models, business models, marketing models, distribution models, rights models, standard contracts, all of those kinds of things. We also have within our toolkit things like reputation. Where are we on the reputational scale? We're constantly sort of trying to evaluate and grow that typically. And we also have things like passion and drive and motivation, all of which hopefully live in your toolkit. What I want to talk about a little bit today is how some of those tools are changing in the digital age, and how tools that you might have thought were not as important, or that you haven't looked at for quite a long time, are definitely worth another look. And hopefully this afternoon you'll hear a lot of examples of people who've done that in a very radical way and are really rethinking the way that they use the tools available to them. The first one I want to touch on, and actually Sara touched on a little bit, is actually passion. I think for many of us, the passion we feel about a particular story is often profound. It's what actually gets us out of bed in the morning. It's what actually gets us knocking on doors, trying to get help to make and tell the story that we want to tell. I think frequently, however, we feel as if often it's a disadvantage sometimes. I know myself, I'd like to be more dispassionate sometimes about what I want to do and the stories I want to tell. I've been extremely restrained, and some of you will notice that I'm planting my hands on the rostrum. That's because usually they do this, and the people filming get really cross with me. So I'm trying very hard. But it's that arm-waving passion that frequently is something that we think is, it kind of is a bit of a tell. We don't actually want people to know just how strongly we feel about this, particularly when we're talking to the financiers. We want them to think we're business people. We know what we're doing, and we're not going to make passionate decisions. I think one of the things that you recognise in the digital age is that passion actually becomes everything. Because that passion is what connects you to your audiences. When there's no one between you and your audiences, that's what engages them. And again, I think the Four-Eyed Monsters is such a fantastic example of this. It's that personal storytelling and passion that engages your audiences with you. And I think it's one of those sort of things in our toolkits. It's definitely worth a bit of an airing and a rethink about how you engage directly with audiences. And again, just to reiterate, passion is definitely the key in my opinion. I think the other sort of new tools I'm going to talk about are not nearly so prosaic. So bear with me here, folks. I'm going to go straight into the rights discussion. I should do a little background here. Part of the reason that I was frequently putting my forehead against brick walls for a long period of time was that I was one of the evangelists, of the tent-raising, travelling around the world kind of evangelist. I worked for an organisation called Creative Commons. I was the director, founding director of Commons, which is the international arm of Creative Commons. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about Creative Commons, very much in the same vein, just as another thing to put in your toolkit, something to keep in mind that might help you in terms of thinking about your rights and how you want to give those away or retain those, and also, again, how it might be able to help you as a marketing and distribution tool. I want to start by just asking very quickly, who's heard of Creative Commons? See? Walls crumbling in front of me. Can't tell you how many years I did that, and everyone would go. Who's used Creative Commons? Wow, that's even better. Look at this. So I am not going to labour this then. Many of you know what it is. But very briefly, Creative Commons is simply a licence, as in a standard piece of writing that's in legal speak, that allows you to talk to people about the rights you want to retain and the rights that you want to share in your creative work. It's that simple. That's all it is. It is literally a bunch of very geeky lawyers in America. We heard actually a quote from Lawrence Lessig, he was certainly one of them, who decided that they could use their lawyer powers for good for a moment. And they sat down and they created a set of legal documents that are just licenses that literally modularised copyright. So essentially what it did was that they looked at copyright law, and they've done this now, I haven't done a check lately, but last time I checked it was in about 60 countries, so 60 different legal systems. They've looked at copyright law, they've broken it into its component parts. Copyright law actually embraces quite a broad spectrum of different rights. They've modularised that, and they've created an online system that allows you to pick and choose which modules you want to apply to your content. For example, you might decide that you are completely happy having your creative work distributed online, shared with as many people as can possibly get their sticky little hands on it. You are quite happy for that to happen, but you want to retain commercial exploitation rights exclusively for yourself. In other words, anyone who has a copy of your work cannot commercially exploit it. They can't go and then make money out of that, but they can share that around as many times as they want. They can pass it on to their friends, they can post it, they can do what they would like with it. So what they've done is they've separated out the economic right from the copy right, if you like. Again, I'm not going to go through them all. In summary, 6 licenses. The 6 licenses essentially are a kind of mix and match grab of those different modules and allow you to really think about what is the best way for the most number of people to see your work in a way that works for your piece of creative work. Why is this important? Well, I think we've heard a lot already about the capacity for the internet to be able to connect you directly with audiences. I've talked about it, Peter referred to it, Sarah, and definitely YouTube and Withoutabox is also very much in that space where it's recognising, in fact, sorry, and Ira did very well this morning as well, talk about cutting out the middleman, being able to engage directly with your audiences. And what the Creative Commons licenses allow you to do is to define a relationship with your audiences that doesn't necessarily require you to speak to every single one of them when they want to do something with your work. So what you're essentially doing is you're empowering your audience to become part of your distribution network. You're empowering your audience to potentially become part of your creative collaborative network, because one of the other things that you can do with Creative Commons licenses is you can release the right for people to be able to take your word and cut it up, do something different with it, take a part of your work and incorporate it into their work. For some of us, that's quite radical. For others of us, that feels completely natural. The point being is that you start to be able to have a relationship again with collaborators, with audiences, that empowers them to do something with your work that can in turn bring benefit back to you and that work. The most obvious one, of course, is just eyeballs. It's beating the obscurity problem. It's making sure that actually as many people as possible actually see what you have made. And I come back to Peter's point earlier today, which is the very, very best of films is, frankly, not anything unless somebody sees it. And so, you know, one of the greatest battles that independent filmmakers have is obscurity. How on earth do we get more people to see the work that we make? And I think Creative Commons is a way. I don't want to labour this because I think there's lots of other sort of mechanisms that are in play to do the same thing. Really what I'm trying to do is use Creative Commons as an example of some things you really should be looking at in that toolkit, so that when you're thinking about your film, you start to make some decisions about how you think you are going to get that to an audience in a way that makes sense for you from a business perspective, but also from a creative reward perspective. You know, how am I just going to get people to see this? I think also the interesting thing with Creative Commons is that they've just tacked in onto the back of the licensing system a commercial realisation component, which essentially allows you to do, it's a very fancy way of just saying, it allows you to link back to a payment service. So if, for example, you want to distribute under non-commercial, but you want to make it really simple for people to be able to connect with you again, should they want to use it for commercial purposes. So all we're doing there is just closing that loop. The work is spreading around, somebody sees your film, they want to use a part of it, or they want to screen it, or for whatever commercial purposes they want to make of that film, they can connect straight back into a commercial connection with you. So that's one sort of toolkit that I wanted to talk about. The other one that I wanted to very, very quickly touch on, and again, I feel like sort of the radical edge has been taken off this slightly, is just talk about DRM. Actually, does everybody know what DRM is? Oh, okay. Yeah. So DRM is a geek acronym for digital rights management. We could roll through all of the acronyms. There's TPMs, there's DRMs, there's a whole bunch more. Essentially, it's a technology. Okay, we could argue this one all afternoon, so bear with me here. I'm just going to go for a really simplistic description. It's a technology sort of barrier or a technology envelope that exists around content, and that envelope defines how you can use the content. One of the things that I just want to say, and again, it's been said, it's worth repeating, is again, DRM, TPMs, any kind of technical protection are barriers. It doesn't matter how you cut it, they are a hurdle between your work and your audience. Sometimes those hurdles are necessary. Most times, I would argue, they are not. And the reason that I sort of often finish my talks by saying this is, again, I come back to sort of the independent filmmaker. My background is much more in the documentary space, where if it's all possible, the problem is even more acute in terms of getting audiences to actually see your work. You just don't want to be putting barriers between your work and your audiences. Find a way to realize a business model that celebrates your audience's desire to see your work. Do not punish them for wanting to see your work. And more often than not, digital rights management systems make your audiences work very, very hard to actually watch or consume your work. I would point to the BBC's iPlayer experience. Has anybody tried to access the iPlayer? Yeah, see, the giggles say it all. It's a really, really difficult process, and frankly, as somebody who pays a license fee, I feel like I'm being punished for wanting to actually consume the content that I'm paying to have made. And in your case, you just want people to enjoy and celebrate your work. You need to welcome them to that work rather than put barriers in place. Again, I don't want to be too didactic about this, but all I would really encourage you to do is, again, when you're thinking about the tools that are at your disposal, make sure that you do not take for granted when somebody says this is the right tool. It's a time of transition. It's a time for re-evaluating the tools that you have at your disposal. So in summary, passion is on the up. Evaluating all of the tools, all of your standard contracts, all of your norms, also on the up. Confusion, also on the up. First to admit it. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Kelly DeVine, and as Michael had mentioned, I did first have a background in very traditional media. I was a film buyer for a U.S. cable channel called the Independent Film Channel, which now is really just IFC because they don't want to really point out independent film. They just want to be a bunch of letters. And certainly some of Peter's remarks about the gatekeeper role were, that was very much what my role was. That was what our, the job of being in acquisitions was. And there was a time when it was great fun, and it was also very creative. Certainly from the filmmaker's standpoint, they do look at it as it's your job to say no to their film. As I used to explain to my neighbors who didn't know anything about the business, I used to say, well, it was my job to watch film all day long to save you from 2 painful hours of your life that you'd never get back. So there's always 2 ways to look at it. But acquisitions is not so much fun any longer because the landscape for cable networks is changing rapidly. And film buying is no longer considered a creative aspect of cable programming because they want to put their resources into material that they can brand and own and stamp their name all over. Also, I used to buy shorts, and we used to, although it was very nominal, we used to pay people for the shorts. And toward the end of my tenure at IFC, they had decided that they didn't need to pay people for shorts anymore because there were so many sites where shorts were free, and that it might be a good idea for them to also just post a player on their website and invite people to upload them for free. And so, I had what I thought was also a very pleasurable part of being one of those gatekeepers was I had seen the first shorts from the filmmaking team behind Half Nelson, had bought the first short from Nicole Cassell, who later went on to make The Woodsman. In terms of buying feature films from completely unknown artists, probably the biggest feather in my cap was getting Lost in La Mancha when it was just in rough cut form, and after everyone had turned it down, finding some way to get it made and see it for the first time in Berlin. So that was very exciting. And so that was what I used to do. And I had gotten very frustrated and decided to become a consultant. I wasn't even sure that I would stay in the industry since I wasn't particularly wedded to it, although I have a great passion and love for all types of media. And as a consultant, I program film festivals, I counsel filmmakers, and the hard thing about counseling filmmakers in a day like today is that there used to be one way to do it. It might be difficult and it might have a lot of obstacles, but there used to be one way to do it. Now there's so many ways to do it, and that's the most difficult thing is helping people deal with their expectations and deal with their own limitations and you know, in this ever-changing market that has increasing opportunities, but also has sometimes, you know, too much choice is very confusing, as you noted as well. One of my consultancy clients is Renew Media, which is a nonprofit organization in the United States. It was formed 20 years ago by the Rockefeller Foundation. The Rockefeller Foundation, as with many foundations, philanthropic foundations in the United States, writes checks to filmmakers based on a convergence of the filmmaker's idea and a particular topic that the philanthropic organization wants to have attention paid. But they said, you know, we're writing these checks and the films are getting made, and that doesn't seem to be as much the issue. Now the issue seems to be getting them seen. And so they started Renew Media with that goal in mind, that Renew Media's job would be to cultivate audiences as well as support independent distribution and filmmakers. And their latest project to that end is Reframe, which is going to be a social network, but while everyone else has been talking mostly about that elusive general audience, we are very targeted towards the institutional market, meaning educators, librarians, public media groups, film societies, those folks who are typically consuming media not for home use or individual use, but for projection either in a classroom setting, a library setting, or some kind of communal viewing. And but we face the same issues that the general audience distributors face, and that is access to the material, awareness, and a clear place for the audience to, you know, to congregate and to find these things. What we're doing with Reframe, and I'll be very brief so we can start taking your questions, what we're doing with Reframe is on one hand creating a social network that goes beyond being a simple database of all of the documentaries, shorts, 1 hours, features, whether they're documentaries or narratives, that we've all seen at markets and we've all read about as they come in and out of festival play and then disappear. We wanted to go beyond just having a database, but also to find creative partnerships to allow those materials to be easily purchased. We're also trying to create a context so that professors, librarians, all these folks who are using this material for communal purposes can have a place to dialogue and can have a place where they can speak about film and media in the ways that they are accustomed to doing that, posting their syllabi, discussing different community issues that are important to them. Our way of making sure that we can meet both of these goals, besides building the social networking site, is to develop partnerships with retail outlets, with for-profit organizations. Our first retail partnership is with Amazon.com, and we got them to break open their standard terms and to change things so that it was more reflective of the needs of the traditional institutional distributors. But what's interesting, what we tried to do in crafting this, when in terms of meeting our goal of creating a vehicle for owners of content to better find this particular audience, we wanted to make sure that however we constructed this, that it was both flexible enough to capture the existing pricing models as well as be open for those traditional distributors to start to experiment and to start to change the way that they think about their relationship with their audience. But we wanted to make certain that this is a very small but a closely held market, and we wanted to make sure that it had a chance to break open. So our first deal with Amazon, we feel very fortunate in terms of making the compromises that we needed to make, but as well as maintaining the ownership and the control and the pricing with the content owner. And, you know, so we will be launching probably in January. Right now I've been traveling around a lot talking to folks in order to bring their content into our model. And I think the most interesting thing was I was recently at MIPCOM, which is held in Cannes. It's a big TV market. And I think if I had been having my series of 10-minute meetings every day with them, even a year ago, I would not have gotten, you know, a single positive response. But now things are really changing, even for those people who can afford those big fancy booths at MIPCOM. So it's an interesting world. I'm challenged and fascinated by the changes. But again, I think it really comes down to, to pleasing the audiences and to, creating a fertile area for producers, not only to make one film, but to continue making films and to continue creating and having that collaborative relationship with their audience. And I hope that our program helps to do that. So thank you.
I thought I just want to ask one question before we open it up to the audience, and it really comes from the analog Satan, which I think is in all of us in this kind of scenario. And it comes down to this: the current system that we have. We know we're being screwed. We understand all that as independent filmmakers. But it's a process. It's a process that I understand. You can work it through. But what you seem to be offering at the moment, or a lot of the visions being offered at the moment, seem to me pretty difficult to engage with right now. I don't know what the value really is. In the media sphere, don't I get screwed the same as I do here? Only I don't know who's doing it. And there's no great principle involved here. Also, we talk about business model. We're talking about business models here, aren't we? We're talking about a whole lot of different models, which makes a very fragmented kind of future as far as I see it. So maybe we could start with you, David and Joe. What would make me, as an independent filmmaker, feel I should be jumping right now?
I want to change that question a little bit, because it's not about. Well,
hold on, let me find out what you're going to change that to first.
No. Your question is, what makes an independent filmmaker jump in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how many independent filmmakers are in the audience right now? All right, and you put your hands down, and how many distributors are in the audience? Okay, here's the point. It's not about us needing to convince them to jump in, right? It's when the day comes that the same people that raise their hands as a filmmaker raises their hands and are empowered as a distributor, they're going to jump in and tell us what we need to do in order to satisfy what their needs are.
When might that be?
It's happening now. It's happening with the people who are raising their hands now, right? And it's just going to continue. It's going to continue to build. We're in that transitional period. I would say within the next, a year ago, and if I was at the conference we were at a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. Well, a lot less. We had Aaron and Susan and Lance and Tiffany here who were raising their hands as filmmakers. And today we have, maybe 10 other filmmakers that are raising their hands. This is, as everyone on this panel and everybody that's here at the conference starts to talk about these things, you're going to find more and more independent filmmakers that are empowered, that realize they have the power to just do and stop asking for permission. And they're the ones that are going to generate what tomorrow looks like and when tomorrow comes. So you guys tell us, when's it going to happen?
Well, I think also your point about it being so fractured is really the big problem. It's all the confusion surrounding it. It's very much like the festival landscape was when we started. And I feel like it is moving very fast now, much faster. It's accelerating. So it'll come quicker than these last few years would make us believe maybe that it will come. But also part of it is just organizing it. We've just completed a proof of concept on this digital dashboard, and we'll be rolling it out in the spring, where it will put these distribution alternatives side by side for filmmakers so that they can come in and kind of park themselves, and then there would be essentially a forum surrounding all of these options. So you'll be able to opt in, very simply compare the benefits side by side in a very linear form, item for item, for your digital distribution options, or your mobile options, or theatrical options, where you might see emerging pictures next to certain other options. So it's a place where the outlets can meet the filmmakers and kind of create that handshake in a way that it happens with festivals right now.
So you're the box, in fact.
Well, we're hoping that it's more generated from the outside, and we're just the plug-in.
Okay, fair enough. Kelly, do you see advantages in early adoption and getting involved at this stage, or is it something where independent filmmakers can happily watch the evolution and jump in when they feel comfortable?
Well, you know, I think that's it's always difficult to tell when you're in that flux moment. I think right now what you'll find is that filmmakers who are already showmen, if you will, you know, filmmakers who already are a bit entrepreneurial are going to be the ones to lead the way. And I think what's going to be interesting, though, will be, speaking of toolkits, if then there is some more, you know, if traditional distribution eventually gets turned inside out, and instead of distributors being people who buy a film and take it away from a filmmaker and create a market for it, if instead they start offering their services and they don't own the films for those filmmakers who are not showmen, for those filmmakers who are not so interested in the marketing. And I think that's a way for you know, the traditional skill sets that we see employed in traditional distributors to kind of turn themselves inside out and stop trying to be owners of content and start being providers of services, because not everyone can do it. I know lots of amazing filmmakers who can barely mumble their name.
They're all of our readers, actually. Paula, I mean, what the point I was trying to get to, I think you've all actually got to it before me, but the point I was trying to get to was, if you don't engage in this world now, if you let this thing develop, aren't you putting yourself in a position where you're in a world which has been, which is still within the confines set by studios and big players? Is there an advantage or should you now be working on distribution at this stage before the world's kind of set out by bigger players?
I mean, I think as with, I'm just gonna try and project. The arms help at this point. Do I think people should be experimenting in this space? Absolutely. But then I think that I would pick up the term entrepreneur. I think the transitional space always rewards the entrepreneur. So, you know, chaos and confusion always rewards the entrepreneur, the person who's prepared to take a step outside and do something new and do something different. I think we only need to look at the film industry and the big studios, and if you go back to early last century and sort of see, you know, the names that we now consider to be the, I can't get further away from it.
Stand at the back, you might.
I'm wondering if it's picking up. But, you know, the early days of the studios were all about who was prepared to go that extra step, who was prepared to take that risk. And, you know, the same names that we now consider to be the sort of the enemy were at one point the ones that were absolutely the cutting edge, the rebels, the people that were doing things a little bit new and a little bit different. So, yes, I do think people should be experimenting in that place. But I think, sort of more pragmatically, you have to weigh up where you think your best opportunities are going to be. I think new filmmakers now look at the statistics as to how likely it is that they are going to get a film made, and more importantly, how likely it is that they're going to get their film seen. And for them, you know, the weighing up of, am I going to go the traditional route or am I going to go down and try something a little bit riskier? It doesn't look so risky if it means that somebody is going to see their film. And so I think, you know, for those of you who are more established filmmakers, it is about weighing up those risks and trying to understand where the opportunities are. I would certainly advocate, however, at the very least, paying attention to this new distribution space. And if you have an opportunity, experiment. And you can. You know, you can use it as a marketing tool that does not give necessarily the baby away with the bathwater.
I mean, I agree. I think you said most of what I would say, but I think, should you get involved now? Do you have content? Is it sitting there with no eyeballs on it? Then yes, I think it's that easy to say you should be involved. What is the point of having content, of making films, if nobody's going to see them? So,
are you the rebel? Is YouTube the rebel turned mainstream very quickly? Because you seem to offer a point of distribution with already a very clear audience.
I'm sorry, say that.
Sorry, I was being waved out there. Is YouTube, does YouTube see itself as the rebel organisation that now becomes mainstream, becomes the key way for filmmaking?
I think, in essence, YouTube is a platform, and so it's not a media company, it is a platform for other people to use, and so I think we very much hope that filmmakers across the board will make use of it, whether they are putting out a mainstream product, whether they're putting out something really niche-oriented. Those audiences are on the site and can be found, and I do think that it is a fragmented sort of situation. Again, Four-Eyed Monsters, you have a DVD, you have digital distribution, you have theatrical. These things can work together, and yes, it's sort of confusing to figure out how that happens, but it can be done, and that's the challenge of being part of something new and evolving, I think.
We'll take some questions. One at the front here.
Okay, I am one of these new filmmaker entrepreneurs. I'm blind, I'm registered blind, and so for two reasons. One is, as a potential feature film director, too many producers have now called it, their best comedy moment when I walk into their room with my white stick. And so I've just suddenly thought, well, I've got to do it myself. And also the audience I want to reach, there's a lot of disabled people out there that, find it difficult to get into cinemas, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a huge audience. There's issues that I want to deal with in films, for which I know there's an audience. Now, the internet, like for everybody else, has dramatically changed the lives of disabled people, because we've got once you can get something digitally, you can adapt it. So if you're blind or deaf or different kind of mobility impairments or learning disabled in whatever way, you can get interfaces that enable you to participate and access and create content. So my question is, what are you guys like? YouTube, Withoutabox, whatever. Various other people thinking about digital distribution. Where are you taking the issues on board that, for example, the audience I want to reach might want audio description, they might want closed captioning, they might want different kinds of access, which to overcome barriers that a lot of people aren't even thinking about. I can't use Facebook because it's graphics based, and the screen reading software that I use on computers doesn't do that.
Okay, I think you made that point really clearly. Maybe from a YouTube perspective.
Sure. I think I would say that it's the community on YouTube that does things for one another and provides services to one another. One of our filmmakers recently, M. Strange, again, had his film translated by users into like 14 different languages with closed captioning that they all chose to do as volunteers because they're fans of his and they're friends of his at this point. I think similarly, it would be very easy to find audience members who would be happy to dub your videos in foreign languages. I think when you have a community that's so willing to participate and engage with one another, it actually makes accessibility really feasible.
Are you doing the same with the Withoutabox?
I would use Facebook as a great example, just in terms of the API that they've released. I think that probably you'll see something come out on Facebook that's created by the disabled community that will make it easier to use Facebook. And Withoutabox would certainly like to go in the same direction in terms of creating an open source platform where we're not the only innovators on it, but the entire community can innovate on the same platform.
Yeah, I'm really into this. I'd call myself an internet filmmaker, actually. My name's Tim Clegg. My question's about gatekeepers again. I'm just wondering, over the last year or so, if we're not just shifting that. So we talked about gatekeepers in the past being distributors and so on, but certainly when I'm trying to promote my feature film that I'm trying to get off the ground, for instance, I found when I managed to convince the guys at iFilm to feature that on their front page for a week, that increased the number of viewers by 10 times. So really, that guy that made that decision at iFilm, he's a gatekeeper. So in essence, maybe the most exciting times were perhaps the last 2 years as big business come in, and now they're just putting in their own gatekeepers because, if Fox owns MySpace and something is the the glory days behind us
What's the
already.
question, Tim? Is that
My question is, do you guys see yourselves as the new gatekeepers, or are you worried about other people being that within a year or two?
Can I address that real quick?
Yeah,
because it's, in a way, it's also connected to the question that was just asked. You're putting your own walls in front of you, and you're looking at things, and you're creating gatekeepers where you don't need to. So for the question that was asked prior to yours, you could reach out to disabled communities that are offline and aggregate them and bring them online into a community and then start to market them. To your question, you're going to hear more from Aaron and Susan and from Lance, but here are filmmakers who created their audience not by asking somebody at MySpace or somebody at Google to put their film on the front page, but by going out and marketing and finding the niches, the niche places to bring their audience to them. Maybe it's at a film festival and they aggregate their audience into their MySpace page or to their Withoutabox page or wherever. And then because of the popularity, a company that has a broader reach then sees it and puts it on their front page. So flip it around and realize that you're in control over that.
It's a really interesting question, and one I think this afternoon's sessions will actually touch on a great deal. People who are getting around it. We've got one last question just here.
I think Peter Buckingham before said that we don't have experience now of business models, so that people, they try to get financing and try to project their earnings. But the wonderful thing that's happening, that we're seeing, is that you don't need to sell a lot of DVD copies to make a profit. Because if you go self-distribution, and you're making somewhere between $10 to $15, sometimes $20 or even pounds per DVD if people are buying it through your website, then you only have to sell 1/5 of the amount that you would have done if you did a retail distribution deal to get the same amount of profit. So for example, the guy who did this amazing documentary about the Van Nuys Airport, about glider planes, people would say, what the hell are you making a film about that? But there are hundreds of thousands of pilots out there and people, and they bought this film because the network, the social community, let people know about it. And to sell 10,000 copies, you can do the maths. You can just make quite a bit of money if you're making $10, $20 per film. And in the education, you might be able to speak about this, but I know that people are releasing educational versions. So instead of charging $19.99, $24.99, they're selling them for anywhere from $50 to $250 each. Maybe you could speak about that, but nobody's really been speaking about dollars and cents, pounds and pence. We're talking about theory. But I think that's the realistic thing, is that you actually can make 10 to 20 without a middleman, and that if you can do hyper distribution, use the whole range, but mostly channel it through yours. If you could speak about
let's
what
let
you're
Kelly start that.
No, that was very much a part of when we made our negotiations with Amazon, which is all non-exclusive, because we wanted to accommodate people also distributing things on their own. That we wanted to crack open their terms and their royalty return on DVDs. Most universities do insist that you have a corporate PO system set up, and so Amazon facilitates that. That's something that's generally beyond, an individual selling those kinds of things. So, for that $300 price, through our program, you would get a return of approximately 79% back on that royalty on each DVD that was sold.
Yeah, Paula, isn't one of the reasons why people aren't talking enough about this is that actually the figures, it's much more it's much easier in a way, with all due respect, to talk in grand terms and to talk about actual pounds and shillings. Well, I'm showing my age there, aren't I? I haven't bought a drink for a long time. Pounds and shillings on the ground.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. We have heard a couple of times already today that finding the case studies is really quite difficult, and frankly that's why this afternoon is so exciting, because actually we're going to have some real live filmmakers talking about real life case studies and starting to sort of really get a sense of how that plays out. As filmmakers, though, you do have the advantage of the music industry having gone through this, and there's a lot to be learnt from their experiences at the business model, in the business model sense of it. I would point to, some of the experiences, such as those by a guy called John Buckman, who runs a website called Magnitunes. He's been running this now for, it must be 5 years. It's very much in the music space. But John recognised very, very quickly that you could rethink the record industry, and he sort of turned it upside down. And he has, a stable of artists, just like a record company. They all release their music under a CC license, which means that it can get spread around and shared. And so he doesn't make money, nor do his artists make a great deal of money out of that particular part of the sort of the process. But what he recognised was that that was a small part of the process. And so all of his artists sell CDs and do very well out of that. But actually, the big money spinner for all of his artists and for Magnitunes is actually in compositional commissioning. And so all of his artists are regularly commissioned or their music used by people like yourselves in films. And so he has sort of really created a tiered level that returns and exploits the entire spectrum of what a musician can do in the sort of the industry model, and that's worked really well. So again, we can start to have a look at what is the whole spectrum of exploitation that you can do in the filmmaking process, and then try and figure out how do you exploit that whole thing. So we talked about set visits. That's a really good example of an area that you can exploit.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to have to call an end to this session now. Hopefully there'll be some people over lunch. I've got a groat to spend on my lunch, and I know they'll be available for conversation. I think all I will leave you with is just the thought that having sort of a lot of distribution panels with traditional media, one of the things that I think really is noticeable about the new distributors is the level of passion and excitement and enthusiasm, which I'm sure is going to play a big role in the future. So thanks very much to the panel.
Hey.